How many of you guys have had an adjuster tell you that we only owe for direct physical loss? Direct physical loss. It sounds like to a layman that means, well, hail hit this table. That fucking hurt, by the way. Wow. Hail hit that table and it caused immediate damage to this table in this one area. That is the direct physical loss, and nothing else matters. It's all we owe for. I don't care if you can't get that table and it's a matching set with something else. Ignore all the rest of the policy provisions. We only owe for direct physical loss. That's what it sounds like to a policyholder. So when they tell someone that doesn't know any better, we only owe for direct physical loss, then that person is going to think, oh crap, so they don't owe for all the other stuff. They don't owe for consequential damages that happen during repairs. Well, it turns out that's just language that's changed its meaning. Direct physical loss, according to just about every court in the nation, includes all the consequential damages that occur during the repair process. Everything that happens in the same chain of events that's unbroken by that proximate cause of loss. All of those things are included in direct physical loss. So when they say we don't owe for repairability, we only owe for direct physical loss, that's just bullshit. They do. And the courts agree. But why do the adjusters say that? Do you think that in adjuster school that all of the adjusters you guys are dealing with clearly go through, do you think that they teach them what direct physical loss means? Or do they just say, hey, in our meeting today, we want to remind you guys that we only owe for direct physical loss, and then they move on to something else? Exactly. They allow them to use their own preconceived notion of what something means. Insurance carriers get away with a lot of bullshit, mostly in the way that the system is built. The insurance policies are supposed to be readable policies, right? They're absolutely supposed to be able to be read in plain language. They're supposed to be read in plain language and interpreted in plain language, and we all know in this room that that is just not the case. So how do they determine if an insurance policy is actually readable? In most states, they employ this thing called a flesh reading scale. They take this insurance policy and they boil it down into a scoring system that determines how long sentences are, how many syllables are in each word, bullshit like that. So if it has fewer syllables per word, shorter sentences, then it gets a higher reading score. Does that have anything to do with how something is readable, though? It could be a bunch of random words placed in order, and it still would get a high score, and it just has to meet a minimum score. This is something that is measurable, and that's why they put this in place, but it really isn't doing the service of determining if something is or isn't readable. And this is the only thing that's in place in most states. Number of words per sentence, average number of syllables per word, nothing about terminology. So if it's supposed to be written in plain language, but the only thing that they're tracking is whether or not it has a certain amount of syllables and how many sentences there are, then no one's really deciding if it is simple language. So if there is words in here that could be misrepresented, it will lend to being misrepresented. Someone's going to interpret things differently all the time. Everyone in this room understands that policies that are ambiguous are supposed to be read in the favor of the insured. Come on in. We really just got started anyway. Come on in. Sometimes those policies leave out certain words on purpose or use certain words that have multiple meanings without defining them. And they use that in order to confuse and possibly lead to purposeful misrepresentation in the future. I think that might be the case. You guys might think that as well. This is one of the rules in the state of Georgia that I'm from, and it really publishes all of this information. The purpose of the rule is to establish a minimum ease of reading standards. Here it is, and this isn't the only state like this. It was designed specifically to give them something measurable so that they can say, all right, did it meet this minimum requirement? Great, checkbox. Go on to the next thing. Can we allow this policy to sell? Well, in most states, they have something that they call file and use. If the policy is submitted to the Department of Insurance and say, we want to sell this policy, I need you guys to approve it so that we can sell it to this policy and take care of the policyholders. And the insurance carrier or the insurance department has generally about 45 days to make a determination. Either they're going to approve that it be sold in that state, they're going to deny it, or they'll do nothing. If they approve it, then their constituents might get mad later on when they find out that they were the ones that approved it, when everything goes to hell. If they deny it, then the main source of their money for their campaign contributions is going to get mad, the insurance carriers, and they're going to have a problem. The best thing that they can do is ignore it. 45 days later, if they say nothing, it automatically is approved and it can be sold. And now it's in place. And now they find out a year later that there's some common misinterpretation going on, or it doesn't actually meet the rules that the state has on whether or not it can be utilized. What do? Can they get rid of it? As it turns out, in most states they can't. The statutes in the states are written by legislators through bills that are voted on, and those statutes give promulgation authority to the Department of Insurance to apply those rules in a way that they seem fit, and they write regulations off of those statutes in order to say this is how we will apply this statute. These are the regulations. In most states, it turns out, they have written the regulations to say that if there is a policy that violates the terms of their statutes, then they can remove it if it's a health insurance or an auto insurance policy, but not a fire type or extended coverage or something along those lines. They specifically leave that out of the regulations. As it turns out, the complaint departments also don't have the authority in most states to investigate property losses that arise from a fire type or extended type coverage policy, only auto and health. Why would a politician who has the ability to write in powers in their own regulations decide we don't want that power? What politician doesn't want power? A well-paid politician doesn't want power, I guess. That's my guess here. Contains provisions which are unfair or inequitable or contrary to public policy. It's not allowed to have provisions that are unclear or deceptively worded or encourage misrepresentation. There are words in policies that clearly encourage misrepresentation. And that's the bullshit that we're going to talk about. Insurance companies get to take advantage of people because of the way these policies are written and because of the way the laws are enforced. Because the regulations are what determine how the laws are enforced. And if they're not giving themselves the power to do so, then it allows the carriers to get away with murder. So, all they have to do is make people believe that they're going to be taken care of. And they spend billions of dollars a year in advertisements for that. You guys have seen those. Well, here's bullshit number one. How many of you guys have had an adjuster tell you that we only owe for direct physical loss? Direct physical loss. It sounds like to a layman that means, well, hail, hit this table. That fucking hurt, by the way. Wow. Hail hit that table and it caused immediate damage to this table in this one area. That is the direct physical loss and nothing else matters. It's all we owe for. I don't care if you can't get that table and it's a matching set with something else. Ignore all the rest of the policy provisions. We only owe for direct physical loss. That's what it sounds like to a policyholder. So when they tell someone that doesn't know any better, we only owe for direct physical loss, then that person is going to think, oh crap, so they don't owe for all the other stuff. They don't owe for consequential damages that happen during repairs. Well, it turns out that's just language that's changed its meaning. Direct physical loss, according to just about every court in the nation, includes all the consequential damages that occur during the repair process. Everything that happens in the same chain of events that's unbroken by that proximate cause of loss. All of those things are included in direct physical loss. So when they say we don't owe for repairability, we only owe for direct physical loss, that's just bullshit. They do. And the courts agree. But why do the adjusters say that? Do you think that in adjuster school that all of the adjusters you guys are dealing with clearly go through, do you think that they teach them what direct physical loss means? Or do they just say, hey, in our meeting today, we want to remind you guys that we only owe for direct physical loss, and then they move on to something else?
Exactly.
They allow them to use their own preconceived notion of what something means instead of telling them what it means. They don't even know what it means. So they want you to believe it's only the damage that was directly caused by the storm and nothing to do with the damage to someone's hand when they hit a table. These are court cases. This is one from Texas. A proper definition of direct loss is loss proximately caused by the peril insured against. A proper definition of proximate cause would be that cause which in a natural and continuous sequence, unbroken by any new and intervening cause, produces a loss, and without which the loss would not have occurred. So it's a but-for argument, without which the loss would not have occurred. So you can try to figure out what the proximate cause of something is by asking yourself, if not but for X, would Y have occurred? And if the answer is no, Y would not have occurred. If not but for X having happened, then X could be the proximate cause. There might be something that happened before X. So then you go to X. If not but for, let's call it B, would X have occurred? And if it's no, then it might be B as a proximate cause. Something is the most efficient cause of loss, the primary cause of loss, you might call it. And the but-for argument can help you identify what that is. If not but for the damage to the table caused by hail, and then repairs would not have to be made. The hail caused it. I'm going to stop saying table because I'm confusing myself now. Let's pretend that table is a roof. If not but for the hail damage to that shingle, would repairs have had to be made? No. If not but for the repairs, would the consequential damages have occurred? No. So hail could be the proximate cause of the consequential damages caused during the repair. Same chain of events, unbroken by time. Does that make sense? If not but for the hail, the repairs wouldn't have been made and the extra damages wouldn't have occurred. Unbroken chain of events. Direct physical loss all the way through. The court agrees. So why do they keep saying it? Because they can, and unless you actually know better, you don't know. They don't define direct physical loss. They do define physical damage in a lot of policies for Section 2, but damage and loss are different. Damage is, the real difference between damage and loss can be a financial loss and not just a physical damage. Who knows the definition of damage in policies?
Material change.
Injury to.
Also tangible. Does it define it?
It's not defined, so what do you do if it's not defined?
You interpret it how you would want to interpret it, and you didn't write the policy.
Just willy-nilly. It means toenail fungus.
Well, you know,
You would go to a different source, right? So most courts of law would go to like Webster's Dictionary, Black Law's Dictionary, something like that. Webster's Dictionary says that direct or physical damage is a demonstrable, detrimental physical alteration of tangible property. So demonstrable meaning demonstratable, detrimental meaning it's harmful, it doesn't improve because it got damaged, it's definitely reduced in some way. Demonstrable, detrimental, physical alteration, meaning it's changed to tangible property is something you can hold. Tangible property is not an idea, it's a thing. That's physical damage. But we're talking about physical loss. Loss could include the loss of a warranty because that is a financial loss. Oh, but wait, Matt, they don't owe for warranty. You can keep thinking that. That's fine. That's bullshit. So, if the shingles didn't become damaged by themselves, they only get damaged by the repairs, then that's part of the direct physical loss. And when they say we only owe for direct physical loss, they have to include those things. So usually I would say, oh, thank you. I agree, you only owe for direct physical loss. That's why we wrote our estimate this way, and it confuses them and they freak out. You can see that the policy doesn't define it, but you can also find ways that the policy does identify that they owe for those things. In the how we pay for a loss, it says that we will pay the cost that is actually necessarily spent or incurred. So is it necessary for you to replace anything that's damaged during the repair as well? Can a contractor get in trouble if they don't? In most jurisdictions, if they were to leave damage behind like that, they can be charged with a misdemeanor for every day it's in noncompliance. That's a lot of misdemeanors. Of course, someone would have to say something about it, but they can get in trouble for up to 7 years down the road too, even if a permit wasn't pulled. So enforcement is stupid too, but we're not going to go down that path, not today, another day. This is a problem. The policies give the carrier the option to repair or replace, or to pay the amount to repair or replace, whichever is cheaper. They generally don't choose the option to repair. Lately, they've gone down some paths along those lines, but they've done that before too, and they ended up with a lot of liability issues, and they got away from it. I think they'll probably get away from it again. But for right now, how do you determine what the RCV amount is? It's the amount to replace something with new products. Even if you're repairing, is a repair a repair? Actually, in the code book, a repair is not a repair. This isn't in my slides, but in the IEBC, the International Existing Building Code, they define repair as a renewal of something. If you were to take a shingle and you were to undo the hail damage on that shingle, that's a renewal. If you were to replace that shingle, that's an alteration in the IEBC, a level 1 alteration. And level 1 alterations have to comply with new construction material standards. So all the new construction stuff in the IRC, IBC apply to anything that's being replaced on a building. Just so you know. So what's actual and necessary? I have nothing to follow up with necessarily. Oh, we did get into that. Leaving damage behind is considered an act of negligence, and a contractor that is considered to be acting in negligence could lose their license in a state where there is a license, or they could be fined, or they could be, in some states, it could be considered a felony. In Florida, it'd be a felony. The repairs cannot be made that make the property less compliant than it was before the repairs occurred. So if you make the property less compliant than before the repairs by doing the repairs and leaving current damage behind, you're literally breaking minimum standard building code. That's not okay. Not okay. Is the code a law?
Yes, absolutely.
Certain states it is.
OSHA come through and get you.
Does the county say we enforce this, and they list the codes? Then it's a law.
Yeah, but what if they got George at the village who's a plans examiner to say he's gonna waive it? There's a code for that.
A building official can decide not to enforce certain things. It can make alterations to this, but an engineer can't.
There's a building code that prevents them from doing that in the first chapter, so that's the ultimate circle.
A lot of times, well, that's okay. You have a solid point. In some jurisdictions, that is 100% true. In most jurisdictions in the U.S., they allow that jurisdiction to rewrite Chapter 1, and they changed that.
In Texas, the counties can't enforce code, only the cities.
That's why I say jurisdiction, because it's so different from one place to another.
That's why I said Texas.
So
Yeah.
you put decking on every new slab, like new shingles?
Say again?
Do you put new decking on all new shingles? Always, every time?
No. Why? Why would I?
Nail on the surface.
I mean, I could. You could be unreasonable if you want. I said it.
Listen, as a PA, can I bring this conversation up a little bit?
Are we going to fight on this?
No, I don't think so. I think we're gonna. I'll fight you if you want. But wait, really, I've run I mean, think about it. Yeah, it's a problem.
There's been attempts to prove that this is a case, and with OSB decking, you've got a solid point, and I wouldn't want to put more than 2 roofs on an OSB. It definitely looks wrong, but it has to be demonstratable. So you'd have to literally do a pull test before and a pull test after, or something along those lines, to prove that it is weaker. The reality is the policy pays the amount that's reasonable and necessary, and if the building official at any point decided that they weren't going to enforce that kind of a thing, then it would no longer be necessary. Could it be considered reasonable? That's going to depend on a building official a lot of times too. Building officials don't want to say that something isn't repairable. They want to say that you can do this because most of the people that they're talking about in their jurisdiction don't have an insurance claim going on. If they say that every time you replace your roof, you have to replace your decking, that makes replacing roofs much more expensive in that jurisdiction, and that hurts people as a whole. So they don't do that kind of a thing generally. So I don't think it's probably a good idea to go down that path all the time. If this is your 3rd roof on an OSB deck, by all means. Especially because when you put nails through it, little chunks kind of break off in places. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you want to go down the decking route, but as far as indemnifying the insured,
Yes.
prior to the loss, did they have those 10,000 million holes in their decking that you're having to re-roof? Now, this is granted an insurance claim, and if you truly look at what you're doing here, prior to the loss, did all that decking have all that less weakness, or even taking away one more time, the roof could be re-roofed?
I mean, it's less compliant than it was before the repair was made too.
You know, I mean, there's an argument.
I get it.
For it, you
There
know.
definitely is. There's an argument for a lot of things. I mean, you could take a simple claim and replace the entire exterior fenestrations and the siding and house wrap on everything. You could go to an extreme with the policy and building code. You can.
I think we put the burden of reasonableness on the carrier a lot, but that burden has to also be on us as representatives, that are we doing what is actually reasonable and necessary? As a former roofer who has put on roofs, I would love to see decking on every one of my claims. But if I'm putting that burden on them of reasonableness, I have to also be reasonable in my approach.
We're trying to uphold a contract, right? And if at the end of the day, all of our attorneys are getting this paid, I don't know about you guys, but mine are, then that means they owed it from the beginning and they knew it.
So the decking is put on with nails.
Not, does it though? I mean, there are attorneys that get some stuff approved that probably shouldn't have been approved, right? Because they're attorneys. That doesn't mean that they did owe for it. I don't know if that's a great argument, but you can take things to the extreme. I'm more with, what's your name again?
Rainy.
Yeah. We have to be reasonable because the policy says we'll pay the amount that's reasonable and necessary. Do you want them to just put a wall in front of you and say, no, sue us every time? I don't know. In some states, it's not so bad. In most states, that doesn't work out very well for the policyholder. I come from a state we got no attorney's fees ever. Yes, sir.
The policyholder having his roof replaced does not have to accept used or worn roofing shingles, does he?
No, and we're not talking about
Why
shingles.
do we have to accept a used or worn substrate with a bunch of holes in it?
So
What's the difference?
can I comment?
Well, we're not uninstalling the decking. That's one difference.
You're just rendering it used and worn, more than.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, I don't ask for it on every claim. Which one,
That's the beauty of the art.
you know, there is an art to it, and there's decisions to be made, and there's a reasonableness to apply for certain situations. If I had a certain carrier, I'd probably go for that a lot more often than other carriers. If I have a policy holder that really wants me to fight that fight, I'm gonna fight that fight. If I don't, will I? If it's gonna take me another 8 months, I come from a state that has 0 time frame requirements. The carrier doesn't have any requirement to make a decision on a claim in any period of time.
Georgia, right?
Do what?
What state is that?
That's Georgia.
I've been hearing that.
We get that for the first time in 3 weeks. After a lot of effort with the DOI, they're finally putting that regulation in place. We'll have a 60-day regulation on that for the first time ever.
Wow. That's awesome.
Georgia, it's crap.
What was the regulation again?
Deadline.
The deadlines for carriers to make a decision on a claim to affirm or deny coverage. We don't have one.
Half the Midwest.
Say again?
Georgia is the same as half the laws of the Midwest. The PAs that are working in Texas and Louisiana, like, you guys seriously have some amazing laws. come up to Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, we fight, like he's saying, we have to be more reasonable because going to an attorney does not help the customer all the time because they're having to pay those attorney fees and they're not able to get those attorney fees or bad faith in some other states. So states that you are able to, you go for it. But some other states, you have to be more reasonable and come up with a better plan of action so that you're truly trying to identify your client.
That's close. Yeah. It's hard in Georgia though, for sure.
That's the majority of the U.S. There are certain states that are much easier, and in certain states I would go for things that I wouldn't otherwise. And it's kind of stupid that I say that, because when you hear someone say that out loud, it sounds like bullshit. Why would you go for it in some states and not others? You should go for it everywhere. Well, if I want to actually settle a claim and take care of my client and possibly even get paid, oh my God, then I'm going to have to be a little bit reasonable at times in order to make sure that I can stay in business. There are some things that we do differently and from one state to the next. Unfortunately, that's the case. That's the reality we live in. But in a scenario where the decking is weakened and it's obvious that it is, and I can demonstrate that possibly without having to hire an engineer and incur more costs for the policyholder, then I would definitely go for it. There are ways you can identify whether or not there is enough nails in the decking before you even tear the roof off. And we do that. There are ways you can identify if it's the proper nails without tearing the roof off too. The decking has to be stamped in order to identify that it is rated for roofing. If it isn't, then how do you even know if there is if it can hold or withstand the weight that's being applied to it? We could go down a lot of those paths depending on the policy language, the state that I'm in. It doesn't mean that I do every time. I agree with you though, it is weaker. It is. Is it so much weaker that the wind rating has been affected? You have to do pull tests to really demonstrate it a lot of times. Sometimes it's obvious and you go for it when it's that way. OSB becomes obvious. I would go there with OSB more often than I would with, I don't know, 7/8 ply CDX or something along those lines. Wear and tear, bullshit number 2. Kerr says, we don't owe for that. That's wear and tear. It's not damage. And they say it's not damaged. Those bastards know that hail has hit this roof and they say it's not damaged. It's wear and tear. Why would they say that? Is everything worn and torn? When does something become worn and torn? Is that how you would say it in a past tense, worn and torn? It sounds weird coming out of my mouth right now. Weared and teared? I guess it's got to be worn and torn.
It depends on which state we're from.
Yeah. Such a cop-out answer sometimes, right? Yeah, I'm with you. Well, I'd have to read the policy. That's a great cop-out. They say wear and tear because an engineer probably said that there is some evidence of wear and tear, and the engineer is looking strictly for functional damage. While researching the class that we do dealing with engineers, I discovered that most states, and definitely in Texas, engineers are not allowed to make a comment on whether or not a product is damaged unless they designed that product themselves. The only thing they can talk about is whether or not it is currently performing its functionality.
Say that one more time.
Legally, engineers cannot determine if something is damaged unless they designed it. They can determine if it is no longer performing its function.
If the guy that designed it is dead, does that mean?
Really? No one can ever say that's damn. Well, engineers can.
They can answer specific questions from their clients. If their client gives them a very specific question, now they can. So why do insurance companies refrain from telling them the definition of stuff? Because then they're getting a specific question from their client. Was this damaged in such a way that you consider it cosmetic? If not, the only thing that they can fall back on is whether or not it has been functionally impaired or damaged or whatever. I found that very interesting.
Out in Illinois?
I don't know about Illinois. I haven't done it in Illinois yet, and I usually look it up before I go. Probably. It's in the 4 states that I've looked in.
What's the 4 states?
Texas, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee. Wear and tear. If the roof was currently performing its function, then according to an engineer's definition of service life, it is still serviceable. So is it in a state of wear and tear? A state of wear and tear would be a state of unserviceability. It is no longer performing its function. It's not defined in the policy, so how do I know that that's the case? Well, there is one policy that tells us some stuff. I'm going to go to it. It's awesome. It's my favorite policy ever. It's a piece of shit. It's called the Farmer Smart Plan. But you can take snippets from the Farmer Smart Plan and say, look, Mr. Adjuster, I know you're saying that your policy says this, but it doesn't. Here's a copy of the Farmer Smart Plan where it does specifically say exactly what you're saying that yours says, but yours doesn't say what this one says, so yours doesn't say it. Yeah, that worked. In the Farmer Smart Plan, in the notices to the policyholder, this isn't part of the policy, it's how we apply the policy at the end of it. It's a letter. It's a boilerplate letter attached to the policies that they send out. And it says, remember, covered loss to your property will not include damage due to wear and tear and age. Thus, if your property had deteriorated to the point that a complete replacement was required before the damage occurred, repair or replacement of the property would not be covered under your policy. Deteriorated to the point that a complete replacement was required. That is a state of non-serviceability. It is not performing its function already. So if it was performing its function, then it is not wear and tear that would be applied. This is the only definition in some manner I've been able to find on an insurance policy for wear and tear. Have you guys ever seen this? It's interesting. So, is there a threshold? I think that because the wear and tear isn't defined, the threshold has to be whether or not it is performing its function before the loss. If it's still performing its function after the loss of shedding water, then it's still not in a state of wear and tear. The cause of loss isn't wear and tear. Bullshit number 3. This is something a little newer. You guys have to let me know if you've come across this yet. We sent out an engineer, and it turns out we shouldn't have paid for the claim to begin with. But don't worry, we've already sent out the ACP check. We're not going to get that back. We're just not going to pay any more on this claim. How many of you guys have dealt with that? Did you get them to pay it?
We're going to sue.
Sued? Anybody gotten them to pay yet?
Appraisal.
Appraisal?
What do you think's better in that situation, appraisal or suit?
I already called this a cop-out, but I was about to say it depends on the state.
Well, if it's bad faith and you get trouble damages.
Yeah, I mean, in certain states, it would be beneficial to go to suit because it's going to be paid for. In other states, not necessarily. In certain states, you can't even go to appraisal, so it wouldn't be the option at all. Here's the reality. In the statutes of the state, this isn't allowed. They've already made a coverage decision. Let's say it's wind. Or actually, let's go with hail again. Hail hits the roof. Adjuster goes out and says, all right, we'll pay for a replacement. And then you submit this estimate that's twice the size of theirs. And they say, well, we're going to send an engineer out. But they've already made a coverage decision. So then they send the engineer out, and the engineer says, oh, it's not damaged by hail, because they're using this functional damage language that's in their heads. It's the only thing they can legally talk about because their client didn't give them a definition and didn't ask a specific question about it. So they say it's not damaged by hail, or that it was damaged by a previous storm, or something along those lines. Anything that would have been a denial of coverage to begin with. And now the adjuster gets that information and says, whoa, we shouldn't have paid for this loss at all. We've already paid some, so to avoid an estoppel situation, we're going to let you have that as a settlement compromise, but we're not going to pay any more. As if it's a release. Here's the statutes. These are Texas statutes. And the unfair claim settlement practices. Number 3, failing to adopt and implement reasonable standards for the prompt investigation of claims arising under the insurer's policy. Did they already investigate? The adjuster went out there and confirmed coverage. Why are they investigating again? Was it prompt? Was it fair? I don't know. Notice of acceptance or rejection of claim. An insurer shall notify a claimant in writing the acceptance or rejection of a claim not later than 15 business days after the date the insurer receives all items. Basically a final proof of loss. So if they have to do that within 15 days, can they go back upon that later on? Basically, they're saying that they're not providing coverage anymore as a settlement compromise. They're going to let them keep the money. That doesn't fit this so far. If the insurer is unable to accept or reject the claim within the policy period, within that specified amount of time, they can ask for more time. They can have not later than the 45th day after the date the insurer notifies a claimant under this subsection. That's how long they have to say we will provide coverage or not. Well, if they've already passed that, can they even continue to investigate? If they haven't asked for more time, can they continue to investigate? Why are they sending someone out to investigate again after they have applied a coverage decision? Delay of payment of claims, subsection A does not apply. Subsection A basically is saying that they will have to, let me just read it. Except as otherwise provided if an insurer, after receiving all item statements or forms, reasonably requests or required under section blah, delays payment of the claim for a period exceeding the period specified by other application of statutes. If other statutes do not specify a period for more than 60 days, the insurer shall pay damages and other items as provided in subsection blah. That doesn't apply in a case in which it is found as a result of arbitration or litigation that a claim received by an insurer is invalid. So arbitration and litigation can allow them to determine that a claim was invalid. Not further investigation. That's not listed there. Can they even do what they're saying? It doesn't look to me like they can. They've already investigated. There's no point. Are you no longer cooperating with their investigation if you refuse them to go back out to do more investigation after they've affirmed coverage?
You'll get a nice denial letter for non-compliance.
Are you not complying? They've already provided coverage. You've already let them investigate. Are you really in non-compliance?
Some of the duties language says that you have to exhibit the property as reasonably often and or necessary for them to determine coverage.
Sure.
You've already determined coverage and issued payment.
It's not reasonable.
I don't know if it's about coverage.
Yeah, it's not about coverage. They still have a right to investigate the property.
Interesting question.
This is my exact scenario, is they brought out the engineer, I got the loss report, I said, I'm in agreement with your loss report. The loss report says you have to buy the roof. You only want an engineer to come out there so they can say there's not damage and take it back. And I insisted on an adjuster show up, and we fought for 2 months. And finally, I let him come with an adjuster who wouldn't get on the roof. No one answers questions. Engineer, what do you know? Doesn't look like damage to me, but we already paid the ACV, so we'll let you keep it, but nothing further.
This is happening all over the country. And it's a new defense, and they're trying this out, and it's got some problems. But each state's statutes have different rules that this kind of looks like it might violate.
Did you still determine the pictures of the damage, right? Oh.
And that's the one thing that I fear on the suit, is are they gonna come back and say that I didn't cooperate because I tried to stop the engineer from coming back?
And they have to make that available.
That's what the lawyer told me, in the last.
No, yeah, you're good.
What?
That's what the language says.
There was another rule, and it doesn't look like it's on this page, but there was another rule that said if it was an offer of compromise settlement that the insured had to agree to it. And it had to do with the rules regarding releases. So if they're saying as a compromise settlement, we're going to allow you to keep that money, the insured would have to have accepted that, in writing in order for that to actually apply as a compromise settlement. So if you aren't actually accepting it, then all that they're doing is just bullshit and they can't really do it. How do you guys feel about that? I think it's something to worry about. If you're in a different state than Texas, you got to look up the statutes on this. What is the insurer required to do, and how much time do they have to do it if they have a time frame? Have they already performed those actions, and can they withdraw coverage? We all know they can't withdraw coverage, but they can make compromise settlements if we agree. We don't have to agree to them.
If we're talking about bullshit in state statutes, you get to Illinois, You know how many times the Illinois Department of Insurance has found a violation on a property insurer in the last 9 years? You want to guess?
0?
That's right.
It was a good guess.
That's just what.
I mean, there was context clues there.
Here's 60 times you violated the Fair Claims Practices Act. Report to the Department of Insurance. They replied, we don't think we did. Well, sorry, this isn't the resolution that you wanted, but they said no.
That's most states, really.
And that's
Yeah.
bullshit.
That's honestly what you get in Texas too. You get to, they send a letter, they let them respond, the carrier responded, here's a copy of their letter, we've done everything we can do, we can't make them pay.
It's true.
If you're a contractor or PA and you get a complaint license,
Yeah.
doesn't even matter.
I mean, most PAs get a complaint at some point. Most of them are bullshit, but sometimes they get a complaint. All right, let's move on to bullshit number 3 or 4. Mechanical damage. That's not caused by hail. That's mechanical contact caused during previous aggressive inspection services. That might be what an engineer report says. If you guys had mechanical on your engineer reports. I did a video before at a windstorm conference in their vendor pit. They had a bunch of engineers and a bunch of attorneys. So I went up to each engineer in there and I asked them each what mechanical damage was. And there was 8 of them that I got the question on camera, and I got 4 different answers. So out of 8 engineers, every 2 of them agreed with each other somewhat. That's a problem because they don't define what they mean by mechanical damage in the engineer reports. They do define what they mean by damage, but they don't define what they mean by mechanical. Mechanical damage, by the way, is not excluded in the policies. So unless it's a named peril policy, it should be a covered loss anyway. And if they're still saying no, then you at least need some clarification on what the hell they're talking about. Are they naming vandalism? Are they naming something else? This is a deposition with one of the owners of a very prominent engineering firm that has a certification course.
Several certification courses.
Several of them, in fact. The question is, what is mechanical contact? And they said, well, likely it's been struck with a tool or maybe something dropped on it, another object, and it had left a sharp crease in it, maybe scratched the surface finish, something that a hailstone should not do. Later, okay, could mechanical contact be windborne debris? It could be. If they say mechanical contact to your engineering report and it's a wind loss, they might be talking about windborne debris. Does it read that way in the report? Not so much. Okay, could mechanical contact be from hail? I guess if you wanted to include it with it in the sense of this report, that's not what the intention was. Well, no, I'm saying in the sense of your definition of mechanical contact, well, it's another object. And it's impacting a force onto another object. So yeah, it could be. So instead of saying it's not functionally damaged, they're saying it's mechanical. They're not saying it was not caused by hail. They're just saying it's mechanical contact. They might be talking about hail. That's bullshit. But that's not what an engineer says. That's not how engineers think. They write things differently. Their language is different than the words in policies. They're going to use words from policies differently than in the policies. Damage means something else. It doesn't make them an expert on the insurance policy's definition, though. So how could they be an expert? How could this be a true basis for a denial? It's a fucked up situation. This was... I can't name them. I can't. I want to really badly.
Spell it for us.
Hey, again.
Okay.
I got a little phlegm in my throat, I'm sorry.
They always get uncomfortable when you ask for definitions.
If this is a possibility, then that's some bullshit. This definitely invalidates a lot of reports that are out there. Technically,
With all that talk of several training courses.
I questioned the Hague engineer about the decking and trying to get him to say, was that like that that prior to the loss. He just got saying, well, it's still within tolerance. Like, what's your definition of tolerance? Well, it's within tolerance. I said, okay, again, was it like that before the loss? And he just smiled and shook his head and walked away.
He doesn't have to answer your
He
questions.
doesn't have to answer, but
No. He does have to answer the adjuster if they were to ask the same thing. One of the things that I teach is to get the adjuster to ask specific questions to the engineer. Now, it's better to get them to ask those questions before their inspection.
Actually, aren't engineers supposed to receive all the information that they're given under their
Fucking
code of?
spider walking right towards you. Do you see it? It's so gross. The daddy long leg.
He's not coming at me right now.
It was going right for me.
Yeah. Do you feel threatened?
Yes.
In this state, you can pull out a gun and shoot it. Texas is great. I just moved to Florida, and there's a lot of Florida man jokes out there, and I have a lot of fun with those, but it really ought to be Texas. Florida's tame. You guys are fun. Texas man sounds so much better to me. I don't know why they don't do it. I think that's it for my slides. If you guys have any questions on any of these things, I can go into a lot of details on all of it, or we could go down some other paths. Apparently, I went through this faster than usual. I do have a special from the National Claims Institute, which is in Florida, for our Public Adjuster 101 class during this week. It's 50% off for just that one class. We have 12 different courses that are available. There's 392 different courses planned. 12 of them are available now. This one is available both in person and online through like a Zoom, so you can do it either way. And you can pick whatever session you want. That's not a specific session. Just make sure you guys get the promo code down there. This will take you to the page where to purchase it, and then you put that promo code at the bottom, PPAA2, all caps, and that's the Policyholder Preservation Association of America, PPAA2. And that will give you 50% off, and then you can choose whatever session you want whenever, and you can change your sessions. It doesn't matter. You just have to buy before midnight tomorrow. Anybody have any questions on some of this? Or other things you might have heard me say in other places you want to
I
ask
thought
more?
you were refreshing as can be. What a fantastic guy.
Thank you. Thank you. Even with all the farting?
Didn't hear it.
Okay.
I came in late.
So I have a, you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like y'all institute, since y'all started, has taught a lot of public adjusters and attorneys. What have you found, like at the end of your class, what you taught in that class that they said was the biggest takeaway, typically?
Confidence is usually what they tell me. They feel confident going into the next one, and confidence makes a huge difference on claims. If you feel like you know what you're talking about, you're going to go into it with that perception. When you sound like you know what you're talking about, people believe you more. Confidence makes a huge difference on claims. If you go in there vacillating or adjusters get a little bit frustrated and angry, and they start biting a little bit when they don't feel competent in something. They're not really sure. You guys are definitely, on their ass about everything, and it freaks them out. And they get a little snippy sometimes as a result. They can be jerks. It's because they're not confident. They don't know the material as well as you do, but they know that they're going to get in trouble otherwise. Confidence helps tremendously. There's a lot of information in a lot of those courses that people get a lot of nuggets from, and I generally have people come back and tell me that they employed some of our tactics and it's worked in this claim or that claim, and it's always great to hear. I love hearing that. But more than anything, you can see that they're confident in it at that moment. I think that's the coolest part. Did that answer your question?
I meant specifically like what they said, oh, this is a silver bullet, not that you're probably...
Oh, you want the silver bullets?
Yeah.
You want all the nuggets? Well, shit, man. That's what I charge for. I actually gave you several of them in this session. I just didn't give you all the codes. It would take me about 15 minutes to explain it on.
But for 50% off. How about Zoom?
So PA 101 teaches you how to be a PA. It's not state specific, and you'd have to end up applying your state statutes to the processes that you learn in this. And it's basically for a new PA, how they can act as a PA and take claims and win them. We go into policy language. It's more of a 101 on the policy side. When we get into deep dive into homeowners policies, it's kind of an advanced policy interpretation course for a day. Outside of that, it is basic level stuff. We do have 201 planned. We have 301 and 401 planned. We're going to get into commercial policies in 301 and really start getting into all the fun stuff in 401 for commercial policies, talking about property. And then we'll end up having some marine and war policy courses and things along those lines. Those marine and war policies are actually really cool. If you guys ever get a chance to read one of them, the language in them is so old English, it sounds like, if you put a pirate's voice in your head when you're reading it, it's a lot of fun to read. But you don't come across too many policy or situations where you need those policies. But I won't be teaching that course or anything. I don't teach all of these. I do teach this one. But we have roof inspection certification courses. We got a course that we're doing that's 1 day long. I did it in Texas for the first time. It was dealing with engineers. It's where I found the language about whether or not they can make a comment on whether something is damaged. And
So when you say get the adjuster to ask him first, say I got an upcoming engineer meeting and I can't decide if I'm just gonna pull up the camera so he runs away. Do I have the adjuster, like a three-way email adjuster to ask the engineer these questions before he comes out here? Will they actually answer them? Do I copy the engineer on that? Do I send it to the adjuster, hope that he asks them and send it back to me? Is he actually gonna do that?
yes, whether they actually do it or not, I don't know, but you definitely should. So there are certain questions that you want to ask an engineer. I think we can go over since they asked me to start late, right? Or does somebody start at 3? Are you starting at 3?
3:05, go ahead, what do you think?
Okay, this will be the last question then. You know, they don't have a definition from the policy of damage, so you need the adjuster to ask the engineer or tell the engineer what the definition is. You need a copy of the CV to verify that they are competent in what they're about to do, and you need to tell them that you're going to record and tell them, and they're going to freak out and they'll probably make you sign something, sign it, all that stuff. But you need them to have the definition, and you need the adjuster to ask them specifically to look for certain things. Maybe it's cosmetic damage.
Then you can't record it.
Huh?
You can't sign the NDAs, then you can't record it. You ever read the NDAs they try and get you to sign?
The ones that I've signed say that I cannot use it in social media or for anything outside of that claim. For that claim, I can use it.
Say you can record visually but not audible, you're only allowed to watch it back one time.
I would refuse to
Give
sign
the
that.
device to the engineering firm who now owns your phone.
Yeah.
It's, you agree to be sued for upwards of $1 million for if this gets out, even narrated online for letting out their trade secrets that they've spent untold amounts of money to create of how to take a picture of not damage.
Well, I've never seen one like that, but if I did, I also would not sign that. That sounds crazy. I've had Donan send. Do you guys have Donan out here?
Yeah.
Donan has an NDA that, and I usually have them sign an NDA at the same time because Donan wants to send out an engineer to record us recording their engineer. So they have 2 engineers.
That's funny, we asked them to get a third engineer, and we don't, we're gonna have your, wasn't it a third engineer or something?
That we ended up in suit because it was like, I'm just letting you know I'm gonna record them because of what happened, and then she goes, well, fine, well, how would you like if we send another engineer to record you recording them? To which I replied, we'll have 2 angles, that's great. And she laughed.
It's great.
So we still on for next Friday?
So we always brought out a second PA to record their engineer recording us recording their engineer, and we called it inception level documentation. And we never lost a claim from that. Yeah.
Real quick, back to the training, are you planning on doing the roof certification online as well, or does it have to be in person?
I may make parts of it online just to keep the travel costs down. It's not going to be anytime soon that I do that, but I may end up doing that. But it's very hands-on. You know, I need people to be able to see, touch, and smell the damage. Hail damage has a smell, by the way. I've been able to prove it. It only lasts for like 5 minutes after the storm, so it's not really usable. But it is. There's a smell. It's like a rainstorm.
You're awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.